also reconsiders request by developing country for reconsideration of funding proposals. So what happens is, if a project has been for some reason stalled, not progressed, your application has been stalled. So while they may not take a decision on those aspects of the application or the eligibility, but they come as an intermediary or intervene to help in reconsidering the request for funding proposals for those developed countries. Shivangi, can you move to the next slide, please? Yes. Now let's see what are the detailed view of accountability functions. Now, I talked about reconsideration and reconsidering request. Now, there are process kon. So to process or reconsidering a request, so the independent redressal mechanism addresses requests from developing countries for reconsideration of board decisions denying funding to a project or program in that particular country. After a request for reconsideration has been found eligible, the independent redressal mechanism conducts an information and consultation process to see if an acceptable way forward for the funding proposal can be found. Now, if this is unsuccessful, the independent redressal mechanism conducts an investigation to determine whether the board decision was based on a non-compliance with Green Climate Fund policy or procedure, and may recommend reconsideration to the board on that basis. So this, I would say, kind of gives a chance or a second chance to the people who have applied for a fund to the GCF to raise the issue or advocate for their project again with the IRM. IRM will listen to your grievances. Apan jaha taku apan kara project bisare you want to re-highlight that kainki apanku funds darkar au, why it was unjustified by GCF ki mane grant colony or project grant colony or whatever you have applied for. Now IRM steps in as your advocate, considers your request, investigates that. If they find that all of that is appropriate, and jodi apan project apan decline heini because of any non-compliance GCF policy or procedures kuneikina, then they will kind of IRM will recommend ki eta ku reconsider kara jao and present to the board again for that reconsideration. Now this is the process of reconsidering your requests. So now apan jodi complain korchanti, eta to heigala apankara pre-complaint project reconsideration pai. Now apan jara project arambo hei jaichi, funds milichi, and you are a impacted party or a beneficiary and you want to complain. Apan kemti complain karibe, tar gote process achi. So usually ajika tarikare dunia re email bahut pracharita, so you complain through email or you write to the relevant authority at their address, sending a physical mail by post or courier, ki apna phone uthekina you lodge a complaint. So ei sabu jinsa for processing complaints is provided by IRM as well. So what do they do is that to address the complaints and grievances from persons adversely impacted or negatively impacted by projects or programs of GCF, they first they check the verifying the eligibility. So what do they do is that whether you are actually a beneficiary. Now, whether you are involved in that project or not. So if I talk about who are the beneficiaries, the IRM, the beneficiary would be that to decide on the eligibility and whether you are a beneficiary. It is a person or group of 2 or more persons or communities who have been affected by those projects or program funded by GCF, and it could be in any particular apanakara ga panchayat sadar block ko भी level रा ही परिवे individual गोटे लोक impact ही पारे, गोटे community impact ही पारे, और group of people impact ही पारंते. So all of them are beneficiaries, and IRM decides that first thing for processing a complaint is whether you are a beneficiary, whether you are eligible to file a complaint as a beneficiary. Then second, the next process for next step for processing complaints is that after verifying the eligibility, the IRM engages with the relevant parties to explore options for resolving those complaints, those problems that are raised in the complaint, with an aim to mutually to reach a solution which is mutually satisfactory to both the parties. Now, amane kono? Basically, IRM is doing a mediation. IRM is trying to resolve the issues by calling both the parties and trying to amicably settle the issue between the parties without taking the dispute or escalating the dispute any further. Now, that's the first step. If parties are unwilling or unable to resolve the issues, the IRM conducts a compliance appraisal to determine whether a compliance investigation is merited. And if so, carries out an investigation to identify any non-compliance with Green Climate Fund policies or procedures in relation to the complaint and recommends appropriate redressal. Now, the independent redressal mechanism monitors any problem-solving agreement or compliance recommendations that results from its processes. So, I gave you an example of Morocco, they signed a problem-solving agreement. Now, that is an outcome of the complaint processing procedure and how the disputes has been resolved by the IRM. So, jodi dita parting bhitere issues amicably resolved hei parlani, problems escalate hochi, tale IRM nije gote tankara compliance appraisal process karibo. They will do an investigation on their own, or maybe through the other stakeholders who are involved in that project as part of GCF. And if there is merit, they will carry out those detailed investigations to identify jahan non-compliance heichi. I would say non-compliance kuneikina. They will map that, check it ki non-compliance tankara policies saita heichi, GCF policies saita heichi, or procedures saita heichi, and depending on that, they recommend appropriate redressal. Now, basis that redressal, the outcome is a problem-solving agreement. Jota hitla Morocco. I gave an example. Or they would suggest as compliance recommendations, saying that this has resulted out of the issues in problems or processes, so that needs to be corrected or needs to be redressed. Now, as an advisory, while I talked a little while ago about advisory advisory of the IRM, the advisory role to the board of GCF. ସେମାନେ କଣ କରନ୍ତି IRM will in accordance with the lessons learned by GCF over various cases works across various geographies countries they will do it they will provide a systemic advice highlighting the issues how those were resolved what would be the challenges in a project and what are the solutions to those challenges and therefore they act as an advisor to the to the fund so ଆପଣଙ୍କୁ ଯଦି ଆଉ ଗୋଟେ example ଦେବି in our current world for any project or say for example ଗୋଟେ ବ୍ୟାଙ୍କରେ ଆପଣ ଯଦି ଯାଇକିନା କମ୍ପ୍ଲେନ୍ ଦଉଛନ୍ତି ଆପଣଙ୍କର କମ୍ପ୍ଲେନ୍ ଟା through a process it reaches the manager who decides that whether that complaint has a merit and needs to be redressed and say complaint ro learning taro solution केमती provide करले आपनको basis that they decide on their policies and procedures so similarly here the IRM will advise you advise the board on the various issues that has come up in various countries in various projects how CA board को advise करे कि then अपन एमितिया ही policies and procedures करी परियो because basis our experience across so many countries and on various projects ami aya face karichu aya complaints aschi so we can embed that in our policy and process so that we can avoid future issues now the goal of this role as an advisor is to identify those lessons and feed this back into the GCF and other relevant entities to improve their performance and outcomes of GCF activities. Now, the capacity building. So, how would you do a capacity building? The IRM works with GCF for direct access to various entities to help them build those capacity related to grievance mechanisms and procedures. It will engage and build relationships with entities to understand their needs better and identify the best way to strengthen them. The IRM capacity building activities may take forms of workshops and training, information sessions, dissemination of lessons learned and other resources on grievance mechanisms and redresses. Now, how do they do this capacity building? They do these capacity buildings through outreach. Now, what is an outreach? So, the current session that is going on is an outreach. So, the capacity building is basically done through these kind of sessions, joti lokonku GCF bisare कुहा जाए जोठी तांकर redressal mechanisms विषय कुहा जाए so तांकर how this fund this system works से विषय कुहा जाए और advocacy करा जाए GCF विषय और complaint redressal mechanism विषय or the entire activities of GCF विषय so through these meetings, which could be virtual, in person, which could be through flyers, which could be through their webinars. So eguda kahela outreach through which they reach out and do those capacity building activities. Shivangi, can we move to the next slide, please? Yeah, thanks. So now, what are the limitations to independent redressal mechanism? जेमती मु कहितली आगुरु आपनको कि IRM रो काम हैला only to resolve complaint which is their primary activity. So they will not get involved unless and until there is a complaint, which means that आपनको धरो आपनकर application आपनकर application process रे they will not get involved. आपनकर application ऊपर decision making रे they will not get involved. when they get involved, आपनकर application reject हो गला, आपनकर application को through appropriate authorities it comes for a reconsideration. Now, for those reconsideration, IRM gets involved. But for other, because and why they get involved for reconsideration is because it has come through a complaint channel. It has come for a reconsideration, which is one of the activities that they do. And therefore, they will wear a hat of an advisor at that point in time to review those complaints, check, also wear a hat of supervisor to do the compliance, whether to check whether it was in compliance or not, and then advise the board for a reconsideration. So IRM ro only primary activity is complaint redressal, and they are not involved in any other activities of the GCF unless and until there is an issue or a complaint that has come to them. Yeah. So they are not involved in project origination. They are not involved in implementation, and they cannot address specific project-related questions unless and until unless and until there is a specific complaint that you have raised and that needs to be addressed. Now, can they address specific project-related questions? No, they cannot. So for that, you have to interact with other stakeholders within the ecosystem, within the fund, within the other entities that are part of implementing the project or monitoring the project actively to address those project-specific questions. Now, I talked about the beneficiaries. Shivangi, can you move to the next slide, please? Yes. So I talked about the beneficiaries earlier. Common the beneficiaries, communities, group of individuals, or an individual. Now, beneficiaries are the only people who can complain to the IRM. So the first thing that IRM does, as I mentioned earlier, is that IRM will check the eligibility whether apano e tinita bhitru you fall in one of these categories, na apano a total outsider who is trying to raise an issue. Now, if you are as an outsider or maybe from a general public who is not impacted by this, but still wants to raise an issue, you are free to do that, but not through the IRM process. You can write to the GCF, you can email them, you can write to the other stakeholders, you can write to the ministry, but not through the IRM process, because IRM will first to redress your complaint. IRM will first check whether you are an eligible party or not. And to be an eligible party, you have to be a beneficiary. And to be a beneficiary, you have to be of either of these three. So community, group of individuals, or an individual who is impacted by the project. Yeah, so thanks, Shivangi. Now, functions of independent redressal mechanism with respect to registration of complaints. Now, the working structure of IRM is that, in short, it's these three what's there in the box and on the screen. But if you look at what do they do is that they, as I mentioned, that they check the eligibility, then they assess the complaint, complaint is a beneficiary or not, conduct self-initiated investigations, whether there has been a violation of the policies or procedures of GCF, non-compliant kichi thila ki, and then they if there is a merit and they see that tankara channel through re amicably complaint resolve hei parlani, then they will connect complainants with the professionals who are there as part of the ecosystem of the fund, who come in to help resolve those complaints or mediate those complaints. Now, what's the working structure of independent redressal mechanism? So primarily, so there are the 4 primary bodies under the GCF. One is that Green Climate Fund Board, IRM Ethics and Audit Committee. IRM, Independent Redressal Mechanism, who decides your complaints. Then there is Ethics and Audit Committee, and then there is this Green Climate Fund Secretariat. Now, IRM works in close coordination with the Ethics and Audit Committee. The IRM is independent of the GCF Secretariat and reports directly to the board. Now, you might question that GCF Secretariat ra kama kona. So GCF Secretariat ra kama would be to manage the day-to-day work related to the fund. But we are not concerned about GCF Secretariat kon korchi. We should be looking at ki IRM kon kore, or IRM kemti kore. What's the working structure? Now, ଯେମିତି ମୁଁ ଆଗରୁ କହିଥିଲି କି IRM ଆପଣ କମ୍ପ୍ଲେଣ୍ଟ ଫାଇଲ କଲେ through any of those channels, ତାଙ୍କର ଗୋଟେ process ଅଛି ଫାଇଲ କରିବାକୁ the complaint, and ଗୋଟେ portal ଅଛି ଯୋଉଥିରେ କି you fill in your details, ଆଉ କ'ଣ complaint ଅଛି, and that complaint is taken up by IRM to check the eligibility. ଆଉ ତାପରେ they do the investigations on that complaint. For that, they don't need any board GCF board approval. It's self-initiated investigations. Now, the head of IRM is appointed by and reports directly to the board. The IRM reports to the executive director of the GCF fund only for the limited administrative purposes. Now, the IRM consults with Ethics and Audit Committee of the board with regard to its work plan, budget, and with regard to advisories and other matters that the head of IRM thinks useful to consult on. So, in a manner, he kind of functions independent of the Climate Fund Secretariat or the other members of the fund, because it's a grievance redressal process where he is the head who decides on how his work should be conducted, what should be the plan, what should be the budget to address those issues. He advises boards accordingly about that. So therefore, it is more of an independent body or an independent person who is independent of the other activities or general activities of the fund, and reports directly to the board. Now, the financial independence of the IRM is guaranteed through the head of IRM's proposal of work plan and the budget that he provides to the board for approval. Now, staffing and contracting are also controlled by the IRM. So along with the work plan, they will also decide on तांकु केते support staff दरकार, तांकु तांकर काम करिवा पई तांकु कोन help दरकार, को department functions to help दरकार, ता पई केते budget दरकार. So all of that as part of those work plan. Now, with the aim of seeing that Green GCF project does not affect the beneficiaries and under the program or project, it registers complaint filed by the beneficiary under the GCF and is also empowered to investigate matters on its own based on information from credible source. So, for a case to be registered under the independent redressal mechanism, it assesses if the complainant falls under the category of beneficiary. Now, then since we talked about how the beneficiaries, it is determined that whether the beneficiary, whether the complaint is from an eligible person, whether it is a beneficiary or not. Jodi se beneficiary hela, tanko complaint kemti address hela, we have all touched upon those points. I had touched upon those points earlier. Now, ଆପଣଙ୍କ complaint jodi amicably IRM resolve kari paruni, and as I had mentioned earlier, that they have other people, mediators, stakeholders who come in to resolve those issues, and the complaint is escalated to them to resolve those issues. Now, so therefore, the IRM has a roster of experts who are subject experts, mediators, and translators to assist in its work in relation to the case investigation. So, semane IRM ko help karanti case investigation re, and also to resolve the complaint in a as per the policies and procedures of the GCF. Now, for the purpose of establishing a robust dispute resolution mechanism, in addition to the dispute resolution specialist, 2 other staff members on the IRM team have been trained in mediation with Green Climate Funds. Now, the IRM also keeps a roster of 22 highly skilled mediators. The IRM regularly holds knowledge and experience sharing sessions with its rostered mediators. Now, can we move into the next slide, please, Ivan? Yeah. So there is a difference between independent redressal mechanism. So I talked about the other entities who are part of IRM, and those other entities are, one of them is accredited entity who also have their own separate grievance redressal mechanism. Now, both accredited entities and GCF have their own policy for monitoring the projects under GCF. Now, the policy of the accredited agency is framed under based on the fiduciary duties laid under the GCF. In case of conflict between the two, the GCF policy prevents. Now, if you ask me what is the grievance redressal mechanism of the accredited agency and how is it different from the redressal mechanism of the or different from IRF. Now, grievance redressal mechanism of the accredited agency is that they handle matters relating to non-compliance with the AE policy, while the IRM deals with issues with regard to non-compliance of the GCF policy. So the basic difference is, one is addressing your complaints issues as per the GCF policies and procedures. The other, while in the larger umbrella of GCF, addresses matters relating to non-compliance of their own policies. Now, to whom should the beneficiary? So I'm not getting into the detail of who is a AE or who is a DAE or who is an IRM, because I think that would have been covered in the previous presentations, or might be covered in detail in the later presentations when my other panel members come in and present. So I just want to touch upon that, how the complaint mechanism works and how it is addressed by each of the parties under which policy. So now moving on to that, आपन जदि complaint अच्छी, आपन कहाँ को approach करिवे? So should the complaint be made to the AE or should the complaint be made to the IRM? Now, IRM and AE has to coordinate amongst them. They have to cooperate and collaborate.